Hi, Shannon here, and I want to welcome you to Let's Talk to Animals, the podcast all species can enjoy together. Yes, we are talking about interspecies communication, animal communication. I am an animal sensitive and intuitive, a Reiki master practitioner for pets and their people, and an animal communication teacher. You'll hear more about that in a little bit because we are actually launching Animal Communication Adventure right now, which is my signature student program. And I'd love to share more about that with you if you're interested. For today, on a related note, I want to talk to you about what it takes to learn to communicate with animals, whether you have a desire to connect and communicate and feel more in tune with your own interspecies family. Maybe you have dogs or cats or birds or turtles or horses or all kinds of wonderful interspecies family members, and you want to develop a deeper bond. Maybe you also have a desire to communicate with wild animals. There are so many applications, and I feel like our left brain research arm is just now starting to catch up with that. It's like, the scientific principle of Occam's razor, which is one of the favorite things I love to share with my students, which says all else being equal, the simplest explanation tends to be the right one. I feel like modern left brain Western science is just starting to kind of catch on that the simpler explanation is not that we Homo sapiens are the only animals on this planet that have not been given the wiring to communicate intuitively or telepathically, if you will. Rather, the simpler explanation is that we too possess this wiring. We've always had it. It comes in pre-installed, what I call our intuitive operating system, but we are the only species that does not emphasize it, does not notice it, does not teach our young how to use it, does not practice using it on a daily basis. And so when we do get vibes or hunches or intuitive hits or information that doesn't seem to come in through the normal, customary, or expected channels, we do doubt it. We do worry that we're going crazy or making things up. And that is normal and natural when we're learning a new skill and we really want to do it right. So in this episode, I want to talk about what it really takes to learn animal communication. There are so many applications, as I mentioned, for wild animals, learning to share our spaces with them, with the birds and the feral cat colonies and the squirrels and the insects. I love what the Dalai Lama says when he's asked what rocks his peace. And I'm paraphrasing, of course, but he says it's the mosquitoes and the bed bugs really that get to him. And we can all relate, but there are ways to shift even that energy in a way that feels so much more positive because, of course, the more elevated perspective we can bring to the table with co-sharing our space, the better we're going to feel and the better we're going to function and the more harmoniously our lives will flow and the better we're going to feel about who we are and how we're showing up in this shared world that we live in. And of course, if you have multiple pets in your interspecies family and they don't always seem to get along, right? Disagreements can happen regardless of species. Animal communication is a great way to kind of weather those family storms. There are so many different ways to use it. And what I find is that what stops most of us at the door, and I can share this from personal experience, I'm not trying to suggest that this is your experience. I'm certainly only sharing from my own personal experience and also what I've seen in my students and my pet parent clients, those that are interested in learning animal communication and those that maybe are not quite so interested or they're just not so open to it or they're afraid of it or they just think that they can't do it for some reason. I can certainly relate. For many, many, many years, I hired animal communicators. Why? Because I thought this was a skill, kind of like, and I've shared this before on the podcast, but kind of like getting one of those gold buzzer award-winning voices. You just are born with it. You either get it or you don't. And I kind of thought that being intuitive, and especially being an intuitive who communicates across species boundaries, I thought that was something you were just born with. And I didn't. I was pretty sure I didn't get it. if I had gotten it, if I had gotten it, nobody gave me the memo. It got misfiled or sent to the round file or something. So I hired animal communicators. That was as close as I could get. And I did, and I do feel very strongly that interspecies communication is always happening. And I didn't want to miss anything. I love my animal family. I'll move heaven and earth for them. And I didn't want to miss messages. I didn't want to miss signals. I didn't want them to be unhappy with what I was providing for them. I was very aware of being the head honcho in our little family, the one that, for better or worse, calls all the shots. And I didn't want them to be living in unhappiness with their food, with their habitat, with their siblings, with me. I didn't want them to be in pain or discomfort and not be able to communicate that to me. I didn't want them to be missing out on enrichment that they craved and needed. Even enrichment they were biologically wired to crave and need. And so I hired animal communicators because I wanted to hear. And that is probably the first criteria that we bring to the table. I created a little list, a little guide for myself, so I didn't miss anything that feels really important. Sometimes you don't know what's going to come out of your mouth when you press record and just start talking. And I didn't want to miss anything. And this actually isn't on the list, but it's actually really the first criteria is that you want to hear, you want to know. It takes a certain level of brave. It can be easier not to hear, not to know. And especially, and I'll get into this a little bit later, but especially for those of us who come into being a pet guardian or a pet parent or a pet carer or a foster pet parent or a rescue volunteer, and we are carrying with us our own inner wounds. And this is pretty normal. I don't think anybody's under any impressions, at least no one who's listening to a podcast called Let's Talk to Animals. I don't think we're under any great delusion that there are those of us out there who have somehow escaped all of that and do not have old traumas or old scars or old wounds. And so sometimes we can come into being a pet carer and we feel inadequate or anxious or self-distrusting in certain areas. And so just the whole concept of guardianship of any being, human or non-human, well, it can bring those things up. It can activate those things. And for those humans whom I've met who are rather or really resistant to even the whole concept of interspecies communication, a lot of times there is some of that going on. They don't want to hear because they have already overheard about their own perceived deficiencies or flaws, either from their parents or from colleagues or from a partner or former partner, or whomever it may be. And so they just don't need that bruise to get pushed anymore. And that is okay. We all evolve at our own pace. But if you're still listening, I am going to make the assumption, which is not something I'm fond of, but I'm going to make just a working assumption that you're willing and able to see that if that's present for you and to work through. This is one of the big reasons why I call animal communication one of the hands down best self-evolution, self-development programs I have ever found. Because we can only hear another being to the extent that we can hear at all. And when we're blocked from hearing, when we're blocked from communicating, when we're blocked from connecting, it always points back to some kind of inner work, some kind of inner healing or overcoming, if you will, that is yet ahead of us on our own self-evolution path. And if we want to hear the animals more clearly, if we want to build deeper bonds with anyone of any species, we must break down those barriers. You can think of it like emotional adhesions. Like I've been studying fascia recently and fascia release for some old injuries that I've struggled with most of my life, especially in my back and in my left foot. And I won't go into the laundry list. You reach a certain decade in your life and you do have a list, a working list, most of us. And so I look at this the same way. We've got to kind of press into those adhesions, those emotional adhesions, those memories, those stored, stuck emotions. And it takes a certain degree of brave and tolerance and readiness to do that. The more we do that, however, the carrot at the end of the stick is the more we do that, the more clearly we can hear the animals and the more different topics of conversation get added to our personal conversational table. And I'll give you an example of this because this can be maybe a little bit hard to wrap your head around sometimes. For me, coming from a background of developing anorexia between ages 10 and 11 and struggling through that for a good 20 years before I achieved even any kind of real baseline of healing, and then founding and running a charity focused on eating disorders mentoring for the next decade. Let's just say I'm steeped in eating issues. I'm very healthy today. I've been healthy for over a decade, but I have this in my background. So I have a lot of adhesions in these areas. And so it's not surprising to me when I have more challenges talking with animals about food. Many of my students have no trouble at all. And today I've worked through a lot of that. I'm able to have those conversations. But when I first started, I really struggled. And I'm really grateful to animal communication for giving me that deeper level of healing, that brave that I wasn't finding elsewhere in my life. So that's just one example that you can think about, but it really does require this willingness to hear, willingness. I wake up every morning personally and I ask my light team, please, I want to see, I want to hear, I want to smell, I want to taste, I want to sense, I want to feel, I want to know. Just setting my tone for the day. Understanding that later on in the day, when opportunities come to work through some adhesions that may be preventing me from any of those things, I might not immediately remember that I prayed that prayer and might feel a little grumpy. So we just have to understand that this is a journey. That's why I call my program Animal Communication Adventure. We don't necessarily know what's going to come up. And so great love births great courage. And great courage can produce amazing adventures and incredible results, which is what we aim for when we embark on our animal communication adventure together. So the next step really is that level of brave. We really need to, as animal communication aspirants, as students, to bring to the table, depending on your background, you could either call it faith or trust, or you could just say a sense of adventure, a willingness to open up to the unknown, to something new, and not bring that whole backpack full of assumptions and predisposed ideas and other people's opinions, which is why when I start my animal communication adventure practice circle. It's my graduates program where we come together every 2 weeks and we bring in a pet parent and their animal hero and spirit. And we actually talk with them live on Zoom, and my students communicate with the animal and then receive real-time feedback from the pet parent. And we're really growing our skills, doing a lot of mentoring. It's really fun. And we have to remember going into this that we don't know what's going to happen. So at the beginning of every single practice circle and every live Zoom that we do inside the Animal Communication Adventure program, we start with a meditation to calm your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight system, because that is the system that gets activated and wants to bring all those assumptions, all of those opinions from other people who aren't as open and brave as you are, who think animal communication is woo-woo. These days, I am always awed that there are still people in this world that don't see the validity, that don't see the scientific underpinnings, that don't see the common sense that this is something that we all have access to. And yet I'm aware that there are many, many people out there like that on our little round green and blue planet, I just don't choose to surround myself with them. So I don't get a lot of exposure. But coming in, not having that community and wanting to build that from the ground up, you may have quite a bit of exposure, at least limited exposure. You may have somebody really close to you in your life, like a partner or a child or a parent who really doesn't hold the same viewpoint. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe my daughter or my mother or my father or my spouse is going to do this woo-woo thing. And so what we do is we start every single call or session or practice circle together with a meditation. And I invite you to feel that backpack and visualize your own little locker and visualize or feel a threshold ahead of you. And then feel yourself, or literally kinetically do the motion of taking that backpack off, putting it in the locker with your name on it, and stepping over the threshold. So all of those assumptions, all of those preconceived ideas, all of those doubts and fears, I'm never going to ask you to give them up. And I'm never going to assume that you don't want to, but being asked to give them up right away may be a stretch. We may have some emotional adhesions to work through before we can really do that. So we're just pushing pause so we can bring our sense of adventure, not just for ourselves, but for the other students and for me as your guide. And I bring that for each of you. So I'm choosing it for my own individual good and for the good of all, which dates back, if you have ever seen the old movie, one of my absolute favorites about Dr. John Nash, there's a movie called A Beautiful Mind. And Russell Crowe brilliantly played Dr. Nash.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We are just about to open up enrollment for our next Animal Communication Adventure course. This is a small group, personally curated program that walks you through the steps of the exact process I use with every single animal communication client I work with. You will learn from a real life working animal communicator, no filler, no fluff, just solid, useful information to help you show up for every interspecies conversation that you have with your heart open, your mind calm and quiet, and your spirit confident. If this sounds like just what you've been looking for, I would love to invite you to join us. Head over to animallovelanguages.com/enroll. Okay?
The mathematician who went through a bout of schizophrenia, but right before he began that battle for his sanity, he developed the Nash equilibrium theory, which says that we are wired to seek our own good and the good of the whole, which overturned over a century of scientific thought, which said we are wired to seek our own good at the expense, even at the expense of the good of all. And so he really changed the landscape, or really without probably ever meaning to, realizing it, or wanting to, he changed the landscape for the development of the field I'm in, which is the field of intuition, the inner teacher. And so we want to let go of those feelings of self-doubt, of fear, just long enough to open up a window into what it would feel like to live in a higher vibration perspective. Just give ourselves a glimpse, maybe an hour or two, and in the support of others who are efforting towards the same, because we have that entrainment. We can literally vibe with one another. And we may have a little trouble holding that open mind, open heart frequency when we're all by ourselves, but when we're surrounded in good company and the uplifting, naturally higher vibration frequency of our non-human animal participants, we actually can get a glimpse of it. We can actually sustain it for a little while. We can actually try on different perspectives for size. And here's a good example of that. Let's say one of my students is communicating with our special animal guest for that week inside of Animal Communication Adventure or inside of our practice circle. And the animal shares something, and the student shares that tidbit of information with the pet parent. And the pet parent says, I don't have any awareness that my animal likes that kind of food or that particular toy or enjoys company of cats or dogs or whatever the animal has kicked out. And the pet parent says, no, I don't know about that. Or the pet parent might even say, oh no, that's wrong. Luckily, we don't have that in my circles, in my community, because that is not the highest vibration perspective. That is what I call the Western scientific taxonomic perspective, which says we are the apex predator on this planet. We are the highest level species evolution on this planet. Therefore, we know everything about everybody all the time, especially our pets. So we're not acknowledging that our animals could have a secret life that we don't know about. Wow. That's one of the joys of animal communication. I didn't learn that my soul bird, Pearl, had brown eyes until he was 15. I didn't know that his favorite color was green until he was 11. There's always more to learn. And so what we strive for and endeavor towards is, wow, I didn't know that. I'll have to look out for that. I had a really cool communication practice circle last week with a special guest, and his cat mentioned liking to play with a red ball. His cat had come to him as a rescue as an adult cat. He didn't know a lot of the backstory, except he found him on the streets and took him in. And his response was so beautiful, I almost cried. And I'm not really a crier, but it was just touched my heart so deeply when he said, I will have to get my cat a red ball. I didn't know he liked that. That's what we're going for. And I'll give you another example. And I tell this story to my students a lot. I was in a class. I'm always taking classes. I'm always learning. I'm always signing up for courses to develop. I love that. That's kind of what I live for. And so I'm in a class with a very experienced teacher, somebody that is kind of a household name in the animal communication field. And I had volunteered my Redfoot Tortoise Maltese to be that session's practice animal. So we were all talking with Maltese, me included. Several of the students reported that she was friends with an orange cat. Well, I love cats, but we don't have cats because I have a parrot who likes to land on the floor, and I have not been able to train her out of that. And so we just can't take the chance. But I did not say to the students, no, that's not correct. I said, I am not aware of Maltese friendship with a cat of any color. Well, wouldn't you know it? Over the next few days, in fact, if you're watching the video version, you can see my parrot Petal walking around on the floor right now. So I would love to have a cat, but it's just not safe for anyone. However, over the next few days, I was looking out the window over near where Maltese has dug herself a beautiful mud wallow. She has free run of our backyard, and so she just does whatever she wants and goes wherever she wants. But she has this particular area near one of our crepe myrtle trees, and she's dug a big wallow there. And I fill it twice a day with water, and she just keeps cool, and it keeps the bugs away. Wouldn't you know, over the next few days, I saw an orange stray cat, a feral cat, who would hang out on the fence right near where Maltese was wallowing. And I don't know if that cat had been there in the past and I just hadn't seen it because that area is a little bit tree covered, and more probably I had seen it, but since I wasn't looking for it, I missed it. It did not appear in my line of sight. And that's similar to if you've ever crafted an email and it's something that matters to you and you edit it and you're sure that everything is perfect, and then you send it and someone replies and you see that you made a big typo or you forgot to change the date or whatever it is. That's a really good example of when we're not looking for something, we often do not see it. So I was really happy that I've had really good training as a communicator, and I did not yell out, well, no, we don't have cats, therefore my tortoise does not have a cat friend. I don't know everything there is to know about what Malti does all day out there, or who she talks to, or what she sees. I'm sure it's incredible, and I probably only get to hear about a small fraction of it. So that's a really good example of the kind of mindset and openness that you need to have a positive experience and grow as an interspecies communicator. Now, there's another carrot. This particular stick is rich with carrots. I don't even know how it doesn't snap in half. It's got so many carrots on the end of it. But another carrot is that the more you dive into this openness and willingness to see, hear, smell, taste, sense, feel, and know, the better you will get at up-leveling all of your human relationships as well. Because you will start to hear between the lines. You will start to see behind what is presented. Most of us walk around with these facades or these personas that we project, and they may change from interaction to interaction, from situation to situation, but you're going to be able to start to dive deeper because you can hold space for the truth, for what's really going on. And that points to another key quality that I always review with my students right out of the starting gate. It's the first thing we talk about live in our kickoff call for Animal Communication Adventure, and that is the way in which we listen. So this is what we've been talking about today here on Let's Talk to Animals, and it's really important to understand there are many different types of listenings, but for our purposes here, and embarking on a new learning journey, enrolling in a program, saying yes to a dream, and especially in the face of perhaps self-doubts or self-limiting beliefs about whether it's possible or how good we'll ever be at it, there are three main types of listening we want to look at. The first one is, oh, I know that already. So especially for those of us who are fascinated with all things intuitive or extrasensory or telepathic or clairs oriented, and here I'm talking about clairvoyance, clairsentience, etc., we may come in with a body of knowledge, of head knowledge, of left brain, 3D head knowledge, the kind that we have used so effectively in the past to take and pass tests, to complete assessments, to fill out forms. I sometimes joke that if we didn't have any forms, our world as we know it would fall apart. There's always a form for that. That's not the kind of intelligence we're really wanting to tap into when we're practicing intuition. So it is one thing to talk about and learn about and read about and study animal communication or any intuitive discipline. It is quite another to practice and experience it. So, oh, I already know that is not going to serve you to have the experience. It's not that it's not good, to know things. It's that that's not going to get you where we need to go to really develop you as an intuitive soul, an intuitive embodied soul. Because what happens when you say, oh, I already know that, is you check out. The animal communication happens in this present moment. And when you check out, you head over into your left brain mind, you say, oh, I know that. You're in the past. You're no longer in the present moment. And so any actual learning has been paused. Got to come back to right now to actually learn anything. So here we get to the second of these three listening styles that are so important to know for our purposes here, talking about what it takes to learn animal communication. And that is the type of listening where we say, I agree with or I do not agree with that. That too takes us out of the present moment. We're going into the past, going into the sympathetic nervous system that's just trying to keep us safe from this new unknown experience that we've actually sought out. It's trying to keep us safe. It doesn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and an animal communication program. I've actually heard several esteemed colleagues in the field lately talking about the irony that we've been able to even keep up with ourselves, because our physical bodies and the biology that makes up this interesting spaceship that we each get. We get one issued to us when we come here to Earth, and it's got all these interesting gizmos and bells and whistles, but the basic biology, we're really still in saber-toothed tiger mode when it comes to our fight or flight. We don't know the difference between an email with a typo and getting cooked over a fire for dinner. So our fight or flight is treating everything new like a threat. We haven't learned yet what is and isn't truly threatening or life-threatening. So we really need to be in the present moment in order to override that fight or flight. The fight or flight only works in the past and the future. The fight or flight is going to take you into the past for examples of other times when something alike or similar to has been threatening, and then project you out into the future and this is what's going to happen if you don't take action, aversive action now. So again, we either agree or we disagree. Either way, we bop from the past right over to the future, missing the present moment. So we are no longer learning. Now, luckily, we have a third type of learning that's going to serve you very well in anything you want to learn, including animal communication, and that is, oh, that's interesting. I'd love to hear more. That doesn't presuppose that you agree or disagree either way. You're tabling that. You're tabling the fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system response in favor of, this is safe for me to open up and just listen. This is the second piece of our foundations. When you sign up for animal communication course, you get a foundations course. And part of that course is learning how to listen while feeling safe to do so. And it's a very powerful discipline. Oh, that's interesting. I don't know if I agree or disagree. I don't really care. Let me just continue to listen and learn. That is what I call the orange cat listening style. I don't know if Malty has an orange cat as a friend. I actually don't know. Let me keep listening and see what else I can learn. And then I can put it to good use, and I can notice, I can wonder, I can get curious. I can ask better questions. And that's the next piece, is really being willing to take that learning style, which keeps us right here in the present moment, and run with it and start asking really good questions. Better and better questions, more and more questions, really activating our curiosity. For most of us, our curious self gets kind of cut off at the knees right around the time we enter kindergarten. Maybe we get until first grade. It just really depends. But for most of us, by middle school, we are expected to be uncurious. I don't think that's a word, but non-curious. We are expected to be 1-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. We are on track. We are firmly situated in our 3D left brain minds, in our intellect, in our knowledge. I do feel like some of this is shifting, and we are opening up. There's a lot of talk about what's called the ascension or the evolution, and that's really cool and fun and exciting. We get access to more aspects of ourselves, and we get to experience ourselves in a new way, and that kind of takes us back to that brave. We've got to be pretty brave to meet ourselves again as if it's for the first time. We get to a certain point, whether it's 5 or 10 or 25 or 53 in my case, and we think we know ourselves. We're expected to know ourselves. We assume that we know ourselves, and so often I find that we really don't. It takes a whole lifetime just to start to uncover all there is to be experienced and to be known, to become aware of within ourselves, let alone another being, whether it's another human or another animal or a pet companion or a wild animal. A lifetime is not enough time to even really get to know ourselves well. So there has to be that that willingness to get to know a part of ourselves, an aspect of ourselves that maybe we weren't even aware existed, to be humble and to recognize there's a lot more here within me. I actually may not know myself all that well at all. That takes a serious level of brave to admit to yourself that you may not know yourself very well at all. And that also is kind of exciting because it means there's a lot more to discover and co-create with yourself and with your pets. So that really points to the next key ingredient that you really need to be successful in learning a discipline like animal communication that cannot be studied. It cannot be memorized. Those things aren't always a hindrance, but they frequently are not a help because they keep us out of this present moment where real conversation happens. And that is the willingness to be movable in the moment, to be teachable, to be humble. So often in our culture, especially here, I'm in America, and I was raised here. I was educated here. Went all the way through all of the typical traditional educational levels got my bachelor in business and marketing, which should tell you a lot about how left-brained I was when I emerged from that educational marathon we call the school system. And, it's awfully hard to remain humble and teachable and also maintain that persona of I have my degree or my certification or whatever it is, and I am an expert and you should hire me and you should pay me and then I can pay my rent, et cetera, and also maintain this humble, teachable attitude. I'm still evolving and I'm still learning, and there's so much more to learn, and let's co-create versus let me tell you how it is. Let me tell you how to do this. Let's learn together. I mean, that's a balancing act. That's a fine line that we walk. You see it in a lot of really great leaders who are unbelievably humble. I saw it very, very often as a musician growing up. Some of the musicians that I truly looked up to and idolized, and when I would meet them and I would try my very best to lavish them with praise and put them up on a pedestal, and they would say things to me like, oh, I've learned a little bit. Or, oh, but such and so is really gifted. You really should check them out. When we learn a little bit, we also see how much more there is to learn. And that's the aspect where we remain humble, we remain collaborative, we remain what I call movable, teachable, present in this present moment for how can I grow right now, right here? How can I learn right here, right now? What can I experience right here, right now that will transform me in the direction of my highest good and the good of all? So that's a really important aspect. And you need to be willing. This really points to kind of down deep in the foundational level to really understand that when you say yes to learning about intuition, about your inner teacher, intuitive communication with yourself, with other humans, with animals, what you're really saying yes to is learning a new way to live. I did not know that when I started my intuitive journey, and it's probably a good thing because I pretty much kind of felt like I was barely hanging on. Most of my life, I have felt like there was some kind of manual for how to live life right that everyone else got, and they must have run out when it was my turn to get my copy. I just have not ever felt like I was really dialed in, either at the level of what most people seem, at least most people I've been surrounded with, seem to be interested in or to resonate with. My interests were not really reflected back to me from most of the people that I met. And so when I found animal communication, and that set me on a path transitioning from hiring animal communicators to being the communicator that others hire. And that's been a very interesting journey that I share in some other podcast episodes earlier this season. But what I didn't realize is that animal communication, learning, growing into it, evolving, serving, was going to introduce me to a way of life that feels natural for me. Like I was born for this. I was made for this way of life. No more of this hanging on by my fingernails and throwing up these different, I used to have kind of a suite of personas that I would throw up depending on who I was around to make sure that I didn't stick out too much, that things weren't too uncomfortable for either me or the other humans in my sphere of influence. And I no longer need those. I know who I am at my core. I understand that I have an intuitive operating system, as do you, as does every human animal, just like every non-human animal. And I have enough experiences in what I call my trust bank, which we talk a lot about inside Animal Communication Adventure, learning to trust ourselves in the moment, not in our fight or flight, but in the moment, in the parasympathetic nervous system, in the present moment in time, to trust that we are not doing this life thing all by ourselves. We have a whole suite of tools. We have a light team. We have beautiful guides and our pets, our partners, empathic friends, and teachers. We are not alone. We have one another. We have ourselves. So this feels a lot more natural to me, and it has allowed me to drop those personas and show up as myself. And that is not an easy feat, but it hasn't been nearly as challenging as it probably sounds. When we find something that feels better and fits us a lot better, it's not that struggle. So I often tell formal education averse students or aspiring students, prospective students, I say, this is not like going back to college. You're not signing up for a 12-year slog of 8-hour days crammed into a tiny, very uncomfortable desk or sitting there plugged into your laptop for hours and hours and hours. This is a very quick and dynamic process. It happens right away, and it feels more like remembering than learning, because we have all always had these abilities. We just haven't been directed to notice them, to tune into them, to begin to practice using them. So this is not something foreign. We're not trying to inject knowledge like my accounting professors who were trying to inject knowledge of checks and balances and credits and debits into my head. I did not have any complementary wiring for that, and it never took. We're not trying to add something alien and integrate it into your inbuilt system. We are activating something that's always been there. Chances are good, even if you ask an individual, a human whom you perceive as really, really closed off, if you ask them, maybe just quietly walk up to them and say, have you ever had a vibe about something? Or just kind of known something that you didn't know how you knew it? Or here's a fun one. Have you ever had an angel or a ghost experience? I asked this to a friend of mine one night. He wanted to go to a ghost tour, which are pretty popular here along the coastline in Texas. We've got a lot of so-called top 10 haunted places, and he wanted to, and it kind of surprised me. I was like, I don't know why you want to go on a ghost tour, but sure, I'll go with you. And I asked him on the car ride down there, I said, have you ever had an encounter with a ghost? And outpoured this incredible story from his childhood. And so many of us have had these experiences. Often they've occurred earlier in life when we were a little less closed off to them, a little less what Don Miguel Ruiz calls domesticated. to filter them out of our conscious awareness. Maybe you've even had these experiences in dream time when we are less closed off. Some of those filters turn off so our body and our brain can rest and rejuvenate and heal and do all the good things it needs to do while we're sleeping and while we're dreaming. So you might be surprised how much evidence you can collect that this intuitive internal operating system is present for all of us. And of course, some of us come in with more innate interest in all things intuitive than others. And I'm assuming if you are still listening to this podcast episode and in general listening to a podcast like Let's Talk to Animals, you probably have a pretty strong interest in all things intuitive. And so now we just need to start unfolding that. Just recognize that there's something here for you. There is something calling to you. This is already evidence of your intuition, your inner teacher at work, doing its level best to guide you, to encourage you, to shepherd you in the direction that will help you open up in ways that maybe you could scarcely dream is possible for you. This has certainly been the case for me and has really been the wildest and most wonderful adventure of my lifetime. I cannot imagine me today, and I say this often. I say it in my weekly love letter community. I send a weekly love letter out every Thursday morning, and I would love for you to join that community. I drop new podcast episodes, freebies, tools, resources, discounts, opportunities to join our practice circles, lots of fun things you'll find out when the next animal communication adventure is happening, and all sorts of other news. And we talk about it a lot. How this is the adventure of a lifetime. How I no longer remember who I was. Really, I don't remember. I don't vibe with her pre-animal communication because I'm awake now. It's like the Matrix without all of the long, dark leather jackets and this scary robot men. I'm awake now and I don't want to go back to sleep. I love it here in this open, intuitive space where even on my most challenging days, I know I'm not alone. I have my own back. I have the support of my beautiful interspecies family. I have this amazing light team surrounding me. And I know, as one of my mentors, Byron Katie, says, this is a friendly universe. So that is where I will leave you this week. This is a friendly universe. And if you join us for Animal Communication Adventure, it's about to get even friendlier. You can find all of the information when you go to animallovelanguages.com/enroll. You will be signing up for not just an intuitive awakening, not just the bucket list adventure of a lifetime learning to talk with animals in all walks of life, here and in spirit, your animals, others' animals, wild animals, but you will be signing up for new friendships, some of which may just last you the rest of this lifetime. You will be signing up for an awakening into a new level of self-awareness, your inner guidance system, your intuitive operating system that has always been there and is simply waiting for you to go into your applications, look for the folder, click on it, download it, install it, and take it for a test drive. And I am honored to serve as your mentor, your guide, and your head cheerleader for this journey, because when you say yes to Animal Communication Adventure, I say yes to supporting you 150% every step of the way. So I do hope that you will consider joining us. And I look forward to connecting with you again in 2 weeks for a fresh new episode of Let's Talk to Animals. Okay, you have my heart, all my love, and bye for now.